Hey guys, it's Haley and welcome to another bookish video. Today I'm going to be getting into my least favorite, worst books of 2022. I have 20 horrid books to share with you that you should avoid at all costs, in my opinion. I also just got done with my gift exchange, my holiday gift exchange with my fiance and my best friend. So I am wearing my Tiffany shirt that my best friend gave me. Can y'all believe? This is literally so cute. This is my favorite thing I own. I am obsessed. And she also got me these slippers that I'm wearing right now. Like, does she know me or does she know me so well? And then Cameron got me these little skull earrings that I'm obsessed with. And I'm burning my blood spatter candle that he got me. So just a little horror girl here to share some shitty books with you. And I know people tend to get really offended when I talk about books that I don't like. Listen, girl, we all hate some books. I don't think any human on this planet who has read books has loved every single one. Okay, everyone's allowed to have a book or 10 or 20 or 50 that they hate. And just because I'm talking about the ones that I don't like doesn't mean that it's an attack on you. If you're allowed to have books that you hate, so am I. So these are the books that I think are the worst of the worst of the worst. And if you don't agree with me, guess what? You can unsubscribe. You do not have to watch my channel. That is totally fine with me. But what we're not going to do is fight in the comments. All right? Cute. Let's go. So I'm going to start with the more tame draggings before we get into the really, really bad ones. And I only have a top 20. I was really trying to get 22 horrible books of 2022, but honestly, there just weren't that many bad books this year. Like, I feel like I mostly read a lot of great books. Out of the 206 books that I read in 2022, I had 60 five-star reads, which is just crazy. Like, over a quarter of the books that I read were 5 stars, which I feel like is great. A lot of them were just average. I didn't have that many shitty ones, so good news, I guess. But we're gonna start with the tame ones. First of which is Cinder by Marissa Meyer. And I know this is great to a lot of people. To me, it was one of the worst ones I read this year because it just was not for me. Okay, this is not written for me. I, as you can see, am an adult reader. I like dark books and I like a lot of gruesome horror, a lot of twists, and this just was not that. This was a cutesy little fantasy romance that left on a cliffhanger. So right when I felt like, ooh, we're getting to the action, the book ended. And I'm like, well, I love that I read 400 pages of exposition. No, just kidding. I did not love that. I actually hated it a lot. I gave it 2 stars, but I also gave it that rating with the awareness that this wasn't written for me. But guess what? This is my video, so it's all about me and my opinions. Next up, we're going to talk about a book that I just read, and that is Meet Me Under the Mistletoe by Jenny Bayless. Guys, this was so hard to get through. I wish I would have DNF'd this within the first 50 pages because it did not get better. Okay, this is a romance about a girl who is having this reunion with all of her high school / college friends, and they're there all together for a wedding. But before the wedding, they're doing a little vacation moment where they're all just reunionizing beforehand. And she falls in with the groundskeeper. She doesn't really fit in with all of her rich little snooty friends because she went to school with them on a scholarship, but she also doesn't fit in with her working class family and this groundskeeper guy that she meets because she is seen as the snooty rich girl, even though she went on a scholarship. She doesn't fit in either world and she's trying to make peace with that. And that story for me, which is very, very heavy, commentary heavy, but I feel like the commentary didn't come naturally. It was very, very, very forced. And for me, when I pick up a holiday romance that looks like this, I want Hallmark vibes. I want Christmas vibes. I want light, fun, easy romance. And this was not that. This was way too heavy from what I was expecting, and it just did not hit for me. It was either super boring, and when I was actually in it and paying attention, it was just really heavy and really sad. So I don't recommend this. I think this should have been marketed way, way differently. I would hate for someone to pick this up who was in a bad spot and looking for a fun romance to get them out of their funk and stumble upon like a class war and grief and all of this heavy stuff that's in here. I do appreciate romance authors including like realness, deepness, commentary, whatever in their books, because not everything can be light and fluffy, but for this, maybe it should have been. Next up, I'm going to talk about one that I've already talked about many a time before, and that is All I Want by Darcy Bell. This is a haunted house story about a pregnant woman who lives out in the country. She just moved into this beautiful historical house, and she stumbles across a diary that leads her to believe there's a lot more darkness happening in this home than she originally thought when she bought it at a really cheap price from the realtor. So she starts investigating, and we come across all of these haunting things. It's really twisty. It's a great book, honestly, and I loved it so much up until the epilogue. Okay, this 2-page epilogue, we just gotta rip her out. Okay, I'm sorry. If you don't like books being destroyed, please look away. But I'm gonna take the epilogue and rip it out.
I just did that.
Okay, I just took out the epilogue because guess what? It's my book and I don't want the epilogue in there. Goodbye, she's gone. Nobody needs to look at her. Now it's a 5-star book. No, unfortunately it wasn't. Unfortunately that epilogue was in there, completely negated the entire story that I love so much. So for that reason, I had to give it a 1 star, and it was such a horrible book. That was just such a horrible choice. Why would you do that, Darcy Bell? Please answer me. Tell me, why was that decision made? Next up, we have This Might Hurt by something Roble. I don't know. The author will be right here. Y'all, this was just so boring and so forgettable. I read this for a new release thriller vlog, and it took me maybe 3 days. That vlog was so long because this book took me so freaking long to get through. It was so boring. Nothing happened. It was a cult book. We know I don't like cults. Cults are boring as shit. You always think they're going to be so dark and have all this shit going on when really it's just like a bunch of old-timey seeming women who don't use phones and get trapped in a compound, and it's the same fucking thing over and over and over. And that's exactly what this was. The dual timeline you'd think would make it interesting. This did not make it interesting. It was bad. It was boring. Don't waste your time. Next up, we're going to talk about A Touch of Jen. And this is a weird speculative horror book about Jen, who is this it girl, and this other couple who is just obsessed with her. They just want a touch of Jen in their lives. Please, they will do anything to even have a glimpse of her. So they kind of like start on the periphery of Jen's friend group, and they work their way in and in and in, and they know her more and more and more, and their obsession grows and grows and grows. But this story was written with the most pretentious writing style you could ever imagine. It was so hard to read knowing that this author wrote it, and as they were writing, they were like,
I am the smartest bitch alive.
I just do not like books with that writing style. Like, it's very much giving Paul Tremblay for me, and that is not the type of horror that I like to read. It just completely takes me out of being immersed in the story when I can hear the author's opinions through their writing, and a lot of those opinions are, I am smart as fuck. Because most of the time, it's not that. And this book does commentary well, but then this other layer was added where it's like commentary on the commentary. And it just left me wondering, like, did we need this? Did we need this? Did we need this? Because if this would have been a couple getting obsessed with a girl on Instagram and stalking her and this turning bloody, and it was just that, if it was just that plot, I would have loved it. But the author really had to overcomplicate it, and I don't like that shit. Skip it. Next up, we have our first of 2 John Marrs books on this list, and that is What Lies Between Us. This book follows 2 women who live in a house. One of them is locked in the attic for the majority of the day and is kept as a prisoner. And the other woman is the person keeping her there. And someone finds out about this and tries to find out what is going on. We are finding out along with them what the nuances in this relationship is, why one person is being stuck there, and we're trying to get her out. Well, it was really boring for the majority of the book. And, you know, boring thrillers happen. It's not supposed to happen, but they happen often. And I read a lot of boring thrillers that did not end up on this list. This Might Hurt was probably the most boring of the boring. And another one that I'm about to talk about next is also boring, boring, boring. This one, though, was not just boring. Mr. John Mars did not stop there. No, he had to be offensive on top of it. All male authors, please stop. Please stop writing about women's issues. We don't need you to give us your perspective on pregnancy and infertility and all of these women's issues that you truly don't understand, because as a woman with a chronic illness and PCOS pain every single fucking day of my life, you don't know what you're talking about. Reading this, I can just tell that this was written by a man who has no fucking idea what it's like to live with a vagina that torments you every single day. And I don't think that you should have written this. I think it's actually horrible. And I think a lot of people are going to read this and think,
oh wow, I really understand this facet of a woman's experience now.
When really they have a completely different idea of what it is. Also, I don't know why John Mars consistently writes these infertility issues into thriller plots as if it's something to be so ashamed of that you could literally be murdered over. It's not giving for me. Next up, I want to talk about that super, super, super boring book that I alluded to during when I was talking about the last book, and that is The Last to Vanish by Megan Miranda. Megan Miranda, I have loved a lot of her books in the past. I think I've given 2 out of the 6 that I've read 5 stars, but this one was bad. This one had to be a 2-star. Like, nothing happened. We're following a woman and a man, both of whom are trying to solve these disappearances that happened in the Colorado mountains, very atmospheric vibes. They're doing it for different reasons, but they're out here trying to see what's going on. And that's basically all I remember because it was so fucking boring. It was so slow. None of the twists were twisting. Please, if you have limited time to read, it literally would break my heart if you picked up this book and dedicated your time to it. There are so many more fun, interesting, immersive thrillers. This is just not one. So fucking boring. Next up, let's talk about We'll Always Have the Summer by Jenny Han. This one just makes me laugh. I loved The Summer I Turned Pretty, the first book. Even though I'm not a YA reader and I know that series is not written for me, I read it and I loved it. It was just so fluffy and fun and sweet, and it had this summer atmosphere that I just fell in love with. I watched the show. I adore the show. So well done. And then I continued the series, and the second one I was like,
all right, that's something.
And then I got to the third one, this book, and I did not know why this needed to be written. It was so bizarre. My entire review on Storygraph was just how bizarre. It was so fucking weird. I don't know if Jenny Han just wanted this to be a trilogy really bad, but it felt like she was just waking up at 2 in the morning in the middle of the night, I have an idea for what could happen in this last book, and just wrote it, didn't edit it, and just went to bed. And then she continued to just make it be a twist on top of a twist on top of a twist of ways the story could go with no fluency whatsoever and really no closure at the end of this long trilogy that we really wanted closure for our characters that we fell in love with. We got nothing. And the way that it ended was just so weird. This was just so weird. I did not understand it. I think it is so poorly written. And for that reason, it is on my worst books of the year list. So those 8 previous books were kind of the, okay, they're just bad, don't waste your time books. Now we're getting into the more intense, these are the worst because I have a hatred for them. And just a quick note before we get into it, because I know people are going to have problems. Yet again, I will reiterate, this is my opinion. I'm allowed to have opinions. Everybody sits around and watches the motherfucking Bachelor and judges these people and drags them to filth on sitting on your couch. Guess what? They're people. And authors are people too. I realize that, but we're all allowed to have opinions. That is the hill that I will die on. We're going to start off with Nothing But Blackened Teeth by Cassandra Khaw. Y'all warned me. You warned me. Gabby warned me. McKay warned me. All these people, my friends warned me. And yet, I did not listen. Like a naive little bitch, I went into this book thinking I will be the 1% who enjoys it. I will. I was not. This book follows another group of college friends who are getting together after years and years for a reunion, and it's also for a wedding, and they're staying in this house where the wedding is taking place that is haunted by this bride. And nothing happened the whole book. It was just insufferable dialogue between insufferable characters. And then the last 5 pages were like really fun horror. I wish this was a 5-page short story because it would have gotten 5 stars from me. Those last few pages were great. The horror was effective. I loved it. But unfortunately, I had to get through about 100 pages of insufferableness to get there. And it just was not worth it for me. I think it's really bad. You shouldn't waste your time. Even though this looks so teeny tiny, like what time, Hailey? Yeah, any time spent with this book is time wasted, except for those last 5 pages. I don't have time for that in my life. I don't know if you do. If you do, I'm happy for you, but for the rest of us, we don't have time. Another thing I do not have time for is lazy thriller writing. And that is what happened with The Lucky Ones by Kirsten Modglin. Oh God, this book is so bad. It was so difficult to get through because it was just poorly written. It felt like Kirsten Modglin did not know which way she wanted to go, so she put all the directions in one. But then the ending completely took a hard left and negated everything that we had spent time developing. Developing is used very lightly here. And this was churned out. I believe Kirsten Modglin releases like 4 to 5 books a year. This one was just churned out, and it feels like just another thing where she just sits down and writes it, stream of consciousness, and then publishes it. And listen, I don't have time for books like that. I want something that's thoroughly thought about, that has intention. You know, a book is supposed to be an author's baby, and I just don't feel that this one was treated that way. It was so lazy. There were even typos. Like, come on, girl. What's happening? I'm not gonna read you use the wrong there in a book. I don't know. This one was just so fucking bad. I can't. That's all I have to say. Next up, we have a romance, another one, and that is Cheat Day. Do I need to talk about this fucking book again? Do I really need to talk about this book again? I hate talking about this book. This book had the most insufferable main character of all time. And when we're reading a romance where we're like wanting to root for our main character to fall in love, it just really is unfortunate when that main character is the worst person you've maybe ever read from. And this is coming from a girl who likes unlikable female characters. I love to root for a morally gray bitch. I love a good for her story. In fact, in my best books of the year, a lot of those have main characters like that. This girl was just painfully unaware. It was so taxing to read someone be so unaware of their own life and how they affect the people around them. It was just like watching this menace who needs so much therapy go through life and fucking hurt everyone she loves and not even notice. She wasn't even aware of it. Everything was about her and her issues, and she projected all that shit onto everyone around her, whether she loved them, whether she didn't. She was cheating on her husband the entire book. She was also cheating on her diet. She was deep into diet culture. And it was just insufferable to read. And I get that this is supposed to be mental health rep, and I guess a lot of the eating disorder rep was okay. I just hate that someone who struggles with an eating disorder was depicted this way. Like, not everyone who struggles with an eating disorder is this insufferable and is gonna cheat on their husband. Like, it was just giving shoddy mental health rep with weird implications, and a woman who I could not root for in the slightest because she hurt every single person in her life. She was horrible too. And at the end, it just like made an excuse for it. This was not a light, fluffy, fun romance. This was a flawed, deeply flawed woman that I do not care to read about at all. And while we're on the romance train, should we just talk about Credence? Oh God. Talk about an offensive book. Little Miss Credence. Please, God, why was this written?
I'm concerned.
If you don't know about Credence by Penelope Douglas, Credence follows a freshly 18-year-old girl. It's expressly said in the book that she is freshly 18, just turned. Thank God for all the creepy men in her life. And her parents die. So she goes to live with her uncle, who she doesn't know that well. And he starts a relationship with her. And she also starts a relationship with her 2 male cousins. Granted, none of these people are blood related. It's a step uncle situation and step cousin situation. So no blood relation, but it is her family and it is creepy. And the mental health rep is horrible. Let's say it one more time, horrible. This shit is trauma porn. When you read about trauma porn and you're thinking that that is something like Pretty Girls by Karen Slutter, because I have heard that critique of my favorite book of all time. Pretty Girls is going through trauma and like horrible, deplorable things to have commentary on an issue, which is the police being dumb as shit and women having their cases thrown under in the corner, dusty corner of the police factory, I don't know, fucking office. And nobody caring about them. So it's like violence to draw attention to a very deep issue. That is not trauma porn. You know what is trauma porn? Having a girl and her family go through every imaginable possible trauma, even like the most obscure shit that you've never heard of, using the worst mental health rep to talk about it, and then having them all have sex with each other. That is trauma porn. Okay, this book is horrid. There, to me, is nothing redeemable about it, except for one like little voyeuristic moment scene that I did enjoy, despite wanting to hate everything about the book. The smut, okay, Penelope Douglas, they know how to do their smut. I will say that. But when you're into it and then you're having the realization halfway through a paragraph that this is a family situation, like for me, it just gives me the ick. I'm done. It's so bad. Please don't read it. Next up, let's talk about Miss Natasha, my favorite person. I have given Natasha so many of my coins, and I've also given her so much exposure on my channel, which is priceless. So she can have this. She can handle this from me. She can handle yet another dragging. I don't know what it is. Something about Natasha Preston's synopses always sound perfect. They always sound amazing. They always sound intriguing. The execution is never there. The fear is no exception. I keep buying her books, reading them, and waiting around for the day when I will enjoy one, when the plot will come through the way that it says on the back, but this was not the one. It's about this trend on social media called the fear, where everyone like posts about their biggest fear, the way that they would never want to die because it's so scary. And then all of a sudden a killer pops up and starts picking people off one by one based on the way that they posted about, which I think is so creative. It's so like Gen Z, but not cringe. And I was really looking forward to the execution. It was so bad. Every kill took place off page. We didn't even get to see really what people's fears were because it was more about our main character being a little Nancy Drew and having a little romance that literally nobody cares about. So don't waste your time on that one. All right, let's talk about Mr. Perfect by Linda Howard. This was a freaking 5-star prediction. So I hate that it's here. It's just transphobic. Okay, I'm just gonna call it what it is. This twist was written in, I believe, 2001, and it's transphobic as fuck. Yeah, not great. Someone struggling with their gender identity should never be a twist, so I'm not even gonna give you a synopsis. Don't read it. Don't support this. It's bad. Ooh, should we talk about Audition? Audition. Oh my gosh. This was such a weird reading experience for me. This book kind of did the opposite of All I Want by Darcy Bell, where I did not enjoy the vast majority of the book. But the last 2 pages, they were good. I have to say, the last 2 pages were really good, really effective horror, so gory. But to get there, you have to read 210 pages of just deplorable men. And I know it's supposed to be commentary. I know it's supposed to be satire about this woman-hating man, but as a woman, I can't sit through that and read it. Like, I just can't. It's not entertaining. It's not fun. It gives me nothing. There's just nothing in it for me at all. So I'm not going to put myself through that. I don't care how commentary heavy this book is. The misogyny was just not fun to read about. It was an absolutely horrible reading experience up until the gore actually happened. I did not want to read 200 pages of boring misogyny. I wanted that gore at the end to be sprinkled throughout the whole book. Then it might have actually been palatable for me. Now, these last 5 books that we're going to get into are my top worst of the worst of the worst. Like, this is the top 5. If you have any of these on your TBR, remove it. I do not think anyone should read these books. I don't think anyone will have a good time with them, and that's just my opinion. I'm gonna keep saying that because some of y'all girls, some of y'all need a reminder. We're gonna start out with probably the most controversial opinion that I've ever had, and that is The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Stieg Larsson. I don't understand why this is a phenomenon. Can please someone explain to me why this book is such a phenomenon, why it's like a whole series that people are obsessed with, why there was a movie made. Like, I don't know how anyone got past the first 60 pages of this book to enjoy the rest of it. Like, it is so painfully boring, painfully slow. Nothing happens. The writing is so dense. The font is so small. It's so painful. This is supposed to be a thriller. I was supposed to be thrilled. I was not thrilled. Not in the slightest. I was listening to this audio on 3.5 speed trying to get through this hoe. And even then I was like, okay, really? Because I've been listening to a sped up description of an armoire for like 4 minutes. This is not a thriller to me. This is a very, very slow-paced mystery, and it is just not for me at all. I don't understand. I've tried to understand the hype. I don't get it. I DNF'd it multiple times before I finally eventually got through it and gave it a 1 star. Like, this is just no. If you are a reader like me and you like punchy, gory, twisty books, avoid. But if you're a slow mystery girl who loves reading pretentious writing about the finance things that go on in fucking Stockholm, Sweden, might be for you. Who knows? Maybe that person is out there. You never know. All right, we've gotten around to the second John Marrs book on this list, and that is When You Disappeared. Oh God. This book is about a man who up and leaves his family. We know that from the very beginning. Page 1. This man leaves. He stages his disappearance as if he was murdered, kidnapped, something of the sort. And so his family is in distress, wondering where he's gone, searching for him for years and years and years. And we're following that family searching in alternating chapters. And then every other chapter is him out here living his life on the beach, being this like person who's under the radar, who's missing, who's just like living with no regard for his family whatsoever. Then we are also following in a third perspective, the wife in present day, as he just comes back one morning and knocks on the door and turns his whole family's life upside down once again for no reason. This is a book about a man's whims. And if there's one thing that I hate, it's a man's whims. Please, God, do not just walk out on your family for no reason. And if you do that, the worst thing you could possibly do is randomly walk back in a few years later and just be like, hey, remember me? You all grieved me and thought I was dead and have spent money and time and energy and resources and grief looking for me. I'm back. Like, what? And that is a crazy plot. If it was done well, I can deal with an unlikable man character. It's not that had me viscerally hating this book. No, it was the way that every single female character in this book was written. Not real women. They're not real. I don't think John Marrs has ever met a real woman. Or maybe he met one horrible woman and based every single female character he writes on her. Because wow, this, I think I just glitched. Talking about this book. Every single female character does not feel real in the slightest. They're all obsessed with their own boobs. They all can feel every single piece of their genitalia at all times, and it is viscerally described. They all care so much about having a baby, and it's their number one purpose, and infertility gives them no meaning and no worth. because that's all they're good for, is being a baby factory. And then the twist at the end was so disgusting, so misogynistic, and sprinkled in a little bit of homophobia as well. I don't understand how anyone could give this book above a 1-star rating. Like, it's just so bad, so horrible. Deplorably written characters, horrible plot structuring. The twist was bad. It's offensive. Like, all of those factors, how could you enjoy this book? Please don't read it. Next up, let's talk about one that actually makes me really sad, and that is The Night Stalkers by Ryan Harding and Christopher Triana. Christopher Triana wrote one of the books that is on my best books of 2022 list. So I'm just a little confused. My relationship with this man is very confused. I'm not sure, because I know this man is capable of writing complex, nuanced female characters who are worth more than their body and have a lot of complex thoughts and trauma. But this book is having me doubt. It's having me doubt it, because I had the same issue with The Night Stalkers that I had with When You Disappeared, which was the female characters were written so abhorrently I can't even begin to describe. With the male characters in this book, we got descriptions of their personality, kind of like the little niche they would fall into, like clique-wise in a high school, who they are, what they do, yada, yada, yada. Every single woman that we met was only described by their body and if they were a mom or not. Yeah, the people who wrote this do not care about women. They don't care about women, they don't consider women, but they want to use us as characters in their books, and I just don't think that that's great. It was so disgusting to me, and it kept taking me out of the book, the like gross sexual descriptions of women. It's like, you can tell these authors were getting off on what they were writing, and to me it was so gross. And the thing is, I don't think it was intended to be like gross and offensive, like that's a thing in extreme horror and splatterpunk, but it wasn't that. It was not giving,
Oh my god, I'm so gross. Oh my god, hee hee, that was so offensive. LOL.
like, no. This was just giving, I've never met a woman, I've never touched a woman, and I don't understand what women are. It was supposed to be a fun, campy, Grady Hendrix-esque horror book about two rival grocery stores, one who is just normal, full of normal workers, and the other which is full of devil-worshipping crazy people. And the devil-worshipping grocery store employees decide to attack the normal old fresh way on a random night and massacre them because they literally want to kill the competition. It's supposed to be funny, it's supposed to be campy. It was not a fun, campy time, and I really wanted more from the gore. I heard a lot about this book that it was like super extreme gore, very creative kills, splatterpunk at its best, all of those things. I read so much gore that is so much better than this. I feel like a lot of the kills were creative, I will give it that, and I liked the grocery store setting for that reason, but the actual descriptions were not that effective. I'm looking for viscera described in detail, and I didn't get that. It was just like, kill here, hate women, hate Muslim people. Oh, that's the other thing. Yeah, they're the same way that female stereotypes were at an all-time high, racist stereotypes were at an all-time high. And if that's the offensive part of your extreme horror book, that is just not extreme horror that I want to read. It's just gross to read racist jokes. Like, what fucking year is it? Is it 2001? Like, please, dear God, stop it. Stop it. Stop. Next up, we're almost to the end here, so it's getting real bad. Next up, we have Son of the Slob. What the fuck is this author's name? What the fuck is this author's name? I don't remember. By this guy. It's on the screen, right here. The Slob, I thought was a pretty good extreme horror novel, except for the weird ending. Just took a weird, hard left at the ending and left me with a very weird taste in my mouth that kept me from giving it 5 stars. Because if that weirdness wasn't there, totally would have given it 5 stars. The second one, Son of the Slob, it just felt like a cash grab. It felt like, oh, the Slob did really, really well, blew up on social media, went viral, like all of these things. So the Son of the Slob is going to do really well too, even if it's a bad book. And I hate that shit. I hate sequels that aren't needed, and we didn't need this. I buddy read this with my friend Lachlan, and she literally emailed Amazon and asked to return the book even though she had read it, for a full refund because it was so bad, just so poorly written that she did not think that it was worth the $5 for the Kindle book. And I would tend to agree. The writing was just so horrible. Taking aside all of the offensive content in this book, I'm not even going to talk about that, okay? If you want to hear me talk about that, I have a wrap up where I talked about this book and all of the offensive nature of it in detail. But even if that was completely explained away, even if I was completely fine with all of that, I'm not, but even if I was, this book is so poorly written. It's one of the laziest, fastest written books that I think I've ever read. Like, it was just so bad. It was like trying to be pretentious but failing, which is almost worse than like something like A Touch of Jen that just is really pretentious. If a really smart, well-read person that's a really good writer writes something super pretentious, it's like, okay, I don't like that because it's pretentious. But if someone who's not all of those things tries to write something pretentious and it's just failing, that's just embarrassing. I'm sorry, I think that's just a little bit embarrassing. The sentence structure was confusing. The literary devices like simile and alliteration just were weirdly worded or were completely overutilized. I'm talking like we had 40 instances of alliteration in one chapter, and it was extremely distracting and took me out of the novel. I just did not love any part of the way that this book was written. Plot be damned, offensiveness be damned. It was so poorly written to me, in my opinion. Am I a book editor? No. But am I a girl who did not enjoy this book? Yes. So am I going to include it in my worst books of the year? Yeah. And the last book, the finale of the video, what you've all been waiting for, my worst book of the year.
Drumroll, please.
Roll of the Dice by Matt Shaw. Talk about lazy. This is not only the offensive that I was talking about, not only the poorly written that I was talking about with other books, not only lazy, but on top of it all, it made no fucking sense. It felt like a 11-year-old boy learned that he could be turned on and then just started writing a book that made no sense because he read a few of those like choose your own adventure books and wanted to be like that. Basically, this book is about a guy who lives his life based on a dice roll. He carries around dice all the time and he rolls them, and that's how he makes decisions. So it'll be like, oh, if I roll a 1 through 4, I'm gonna kill myself today. If I roll a 5 or 6, I'll stay alive. And like, that is literally how he lives his life. Very interesting concept. Would have loved to read a book that was written well with that plot idea, but alas, this was not it. There was also an interactive element, which is what caused me to order the physical book and like spend 15 of my hard-earned dollars on this book because I wanted to read it. I wanted to roll my little dice. I wanted to play along. Like, this is basically an adult choose your own adventure book where every time this man has to make a decision with his dice, you make the decision, you roll your dice, and then it will be like, okay, if you got a 4, flip to page blah, 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 and then pick up there. And you're basically trying to get through the story without the character dying. So throughout, you're meeting all of these ends with the character. He's dying in these what were supposed to be entertaining and gruesome ways, and you're trying to get through the book. For me, I did it genuinely the first and second time around that I read the book. Then I just kept getting into a loop where I was reading the same thing, where I was like, okay, I'm just gonna read through all the different alternate endings and try to get this character to survive. Even reading through every single one, there was not one plot. It all made sense and it was interesting. Every single option for the death was just like no description, no gore almost at all whatsoever. And just a lot of like weird sexual themes. I guess if you want to read like some weird horror guy, i.e. Matt Shaw's like weird sexual fantasies that include death, I guess read this book. But if that doesn't sound appealing to you, you can totally skip it. It was so odd. There is bestiality in this book that I read some dark shit, but whenever I read harm to animals, it's always like some fucked up serial killer that's like manipulating animals in some way. Like, it's giving Jeffrey Dahmer vibes, and it's like, this person is a really bad person. That's kind of how it's skewed. But when the book has a character have sex with their pet and it's framed as like a funny, off-the-cuff thing, that is just so unimaginable to me. Like, it's not even the darkness that gets me. It's just like, oh, this came from a man's brain and he thought it would be like good and quirky and funny. This is the thing. And this is the thing that applies to all of these 5 books in this last category, is I hate nothing more than when I can hear an author's thoughts in real time and it removes me from enjoying the fictional plot of a book. I have never run into this more than in the extreme horror genre. I do love the genre. I have read so many books that I have loved, favorites of all time, that write their female characters beautifully, don't offend anyone in like a racist or homophobic or transphobic kind of way, but still serve me all of the gore, delicious viscera, horrible depraved acts, and all of that I love. When I have an issue is when these authors obviously aren't doing their due diligence to seem like they care about their female LGBT or people of color readers. Obviously, I'm not a person of color, so I cannot make that judgment on if someone of color would be comfortable reading any of these books. Look at reviews of people of color, please. Don't take my opinion on that, although I will continue to call out when an extreme horror author who is white puts the N-word in their book, because that can trigger racial trauma. So it's not even about being offensive, even though that's a layer of it, but apparently it's problematic for me to call that out. No, I will continue to call that out because it will trigger racial trauma. I'm a trauma therapist. I'm aware of these things. I'm not going to have some unsuspecting person flipping through a book and read a word said by a white author who might trigger racial trauma in that person when they're trying to escape into a horror book. At least that's why I read horror books, and I wouldn't want to be triggered in that way. So yes, I will continue to give that trigger warning. But for all other issues of non-white people, please go take in other people's reviews of these extreme horror books. But as for LGBTQ people and as for women, I can speak on this and say these authors do not consider us. They don't care if we read their books because they don't care about us as people. At least that is the vibe that I get when I read these characters who are written so horribly and things that are so offensive in such a careless way. Okay, if you're trying to say this is the offensive nature of extreme horror, it's just not true because it was so unintentional. If you put intention into your book to make it offensive because it's extreme horror and you want it to be extremely offensive, that's one thing. This is not that. If you're looking for that, look to something like No One Writes for Free by Judith Sonnet. But as for these male authors, it's a theme, okay? It's about track record. It seems to be an issue across all these people consistently. So that is why they are the worst books of 2022 that I have read so far. I will continue to speak on this. If you don't like hearing me talk about it, please unsubscribe. I don't need you here, okay? I like my community being full of people who can either agree with me or disagree with me nicely. And this is my channel where I literally film myself giving my opinions, so I'm not going to stop giving my opinions on this shit. Hope this video does not get me canceled. If it does, oops. Like, I know that my people are still gonna be here at the end of the day, so deal with it. These are the worst books of 2022, and I hope you avoid them. And I hope you enjoyed this video at least a little bit as you see me giving you the cautionary tales. Okay, I read these books so you don't have to. This is a gift. You're welcome. Thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and go to therapy and read a book this week. Especially if you've read some really harmful shit by a male author, please go to therapy. You are worth so much more, queen. I love you guys so much, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!